If you have ever received an autoimmune diagnosis, you know that the first thing you lose isn't just your energy or your normal labs, it's a sense of control. Suddenly, your body feels like a black box, and a medical advice usually stops at a prescription and a list of things that you can no longer do. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Amy Behimer, an autoimmune health coach who is flipping the script on chronic illness. Amy doesn't just talk about what an autoimmune condition is, she focuses on how to actually live with it, how to build habits when your energy is unpredictable, and how to reclaim your agency when you feel like your biology has gone rogue. Welcome to Healthy Buzz, the podcast for women who are craving honest answers in a supported community. Hosted by Brandy Homerding, a certified nutrition therapy practitioner who believes your body isn't broken, but the narrative around women's health is. Each week, we're diving deep into holistic health topics, challenging the one-size-fits-all approach, and empowering you to trust your own informed intuition. Get ready to feel seen, supported, and seriously informed. This is Healthy Buzz, where collaboration meets unfiltered transparency in women's health. Amy Behimer is a pharmacist and board-certified health and wellness coach who specializes in autoimmune health and behavior change. After navigating her own diagnosis, she became passionate about helping people create better health and diagnosis than before through simple, science-backed habits that actually stick. She is the host of the Autoimmune Health Secrets podcast and spends her time coaching inside her membership community, the Club Habit Hub, where she supports people in building sustainable health from the inside out. Amy, welcome to today's show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandy. I'm excited to be here.
So let's talk a little bit more about autoimmunity, your journey with an autoimmune condition, and how that led now to this passion of being a health and wellness coach to help other people navigate their autoimmunity.
Sure. The first time I ever heard the word autoimmune, I was 17, and I started getting these white patches on my skin. And I got diagnosed with vitiligo. And at the time, it was a nuance because, I was a teenage girl and I thought that I looked different, but I didn't really change much about my life after that diagnosis. Then fast forward a few years, I was in pharmacy school and I started to learn all the things that could go right with the body and all the things that could go wrong. And so in all of these different classes, it's like, oh, well, this is an autoimmune disease and this is an autoimmune disease. And if you get one, then more could be coming. And so I was like, well, I have one of those. So what's coming? And at 25, I was diagnosed with my second autoimmune disease, which is Graves' disease. It affects the thyroid. And at that point, I really felt like, oh gosh, I feel like there could be more. And so at 27, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which was the version of, my body screaming at me, no longer whispering that something needed to change. And so at that point, I was a practicing pharmacist and wouldn't say that I lived an unhealthy life. I mean, I looked like everybody else, but I knew there was something missing and I knew that I had more to learn about what could actually help when it came to preventing yet another diagnosis and minimizing the effects of the ones that I already had. So I took a sharp left and dug into the world of functional medicine. And instead of becoming a practitioner, I realized I really love the part about how people change, or sadly, how hard it is for people to change. And so, especially with the world we're in today with the internet and social media and AI, there is no lack of information, but I was fascinated that the statistics behind sticking to habits that are good for us, why is it so darn hard? And so I decided to dive into the world of coaching, and so glad I did, because now that's what I get to do with people is take anything that you want to be doing and just figure out how in the world do you actually do it in a way that doesn't feel like shit.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such an incredible journey that you had where you've had now 3 diagnoses of 3 different autoimmune disease. And there is a statistic, quote me if I'm wrong here, but if you have one, you're 3 times more likely to get another autoimmune disease.
I haven't seen that exact one, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's all sorts of different pairings where this one may make you more prone to this other one. And, without even worrying about the details, something is happening on a root cause level in our bodies. For me, for sure, and for others that I work with, that uncertainty about the future is one of the biggest symptoms that can really lead to a decrease in quality of life. It's so intangible, but it's so real when you're just worrying about, gosh, is this going to get worse? Is there going to be another one? And so again, that uncertainty that feels so present is just so real. And I definitely experienced it.
Yeah. I mean, for many people, like getting an autoimmune disease diagnosis can feel like their body is betraying them. So how are we shifting that feeling of like, hey, this is a victim, you're a victim of this diagnosis, to becoming more of like the architect of your own health and habits? So especially when the symptoms are unpredictable, how can somebody really like embrace this and become empowered versus disempowered when they're dealing with their autoimmune journey?
One thing that may be different for your listeners and is the way I talk about habits. So I love habits. I love how science backed they are. I love how effective they are. I love how tangible they are. But, and they're everywhere, right? I mean, Atomic Habits is on the New York Times best-selling list for over 6 years. I've never met somebody who doesn't have it on their shelf. They've read it. But I'm, again, back to that. Why is there so much good information on the page, but why are we not using it in our life? So one thing that's different, and how I will answer your question, is that habits, in the way I approach them and live them and teach them, is not just in what we do. Those are the outer habits, how we're eating, how we're moving, but they really start on the inside. They start in how we're thinking and how we're feeling. You mentioned, this feeling of disempowerment that can end up becoming habitual, because even though we don't like it and it feels really crappy, it's comfortable. It's what we know. It's habitual. And so it starts with kind of getting good at identifying, what am I thinking and feeling, and seeing how that plays out in our everyday life. Going from disempowered, or again, that betrayed feeling, and asking, well, what would I be feeling if I wasn't feeling that? What would be the emotion that is more productive? And so the one that came to mind when you were kind of describing that scenario was like trust. What if I could trust my body is trying to tell me something? What if I could trust my body that it does want to function better? It does want to feel better. It maybe is just asking for something from me. And so when we put trust as the habit goal, okay, I want to make a habit to feel more trusting, then we have a goal to work towards. And then we apply the strategies and I call them plays from the ABC Habit Playbook, but we apply those strategies to make that habit a reality.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like so many women, they no longer trust that their body is going to send them the right signals. A lot of that comes from our societal environment telling us how we can't trust our bodies. But then also, like you mentioned in the beginning, like having these little whispers of symptoms that become so loud that you can no longer ignore them anymore. And so it can feel, for a lot of people, feel really overwhelming that now the alarm bells are going off 24/7. And where do they start on this journey to understanding without, I don't know, shaming themselves or like getting mad at themselves for not listening to the whispers too, right? Like we can
Yeah.
often be like, oh, if I would have just followed my intuition, or if I would have just paid attention, or if I would have just XYZ this situation, it could have been a different outcome. So how do we kind of move from that paradox of like victim to, no, you're no longer a victim of this. You can advocate for yourself now.
I love a good paradox. I mean, if we can get really comfortable in paradoxes, then we are going to benefit time and time again. And so, exactly what you said, what I will be spending all of our time talking about until I'm blue in the face is what I call the controllables. There are parts of our diagnosis and our disease that are not controllable, right? Certain genetics that we were given. That's 10 to 30% in the autoimmune equation. There's 70 to 90% that is in our sphere of influence. So those are the things, I call it controlling the controllables, really shifting our focus to the things that we can control. But here's where the paradox is. That doesn't mean that we get to look back and beat past us up for not having the awareness or the wisdom or the knowledge or the desire at that point to do what we now know we want to do in the current. So like we kind of make a deal with ourselves that yes, we are learning and we now want to control the controllables, but let's make an agreement that there is no use and no productivity in assuming things should have been any different than they are, because we did the best we can. I can look back, yeah, oh gosh, if I was 17 and started doing these various things, or at 25, well, I didn't. And I just want to go ahead and love the past version of myself that did the best she can and assume that she did the best she can, because there is no downside to loving every version of ourselves, whether it's past, present, or future.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I always tell my clients, I'm like, you did the best you could with the information you had. We can't beat ourselves up with that. Now that we know better, we can start to do better because we know differently, we can do differently. We don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid for doing XYZ or I didn't pay attention to that. Like, no, we got to like trust that we were on the correct journey at the right time. And now when we have more information, we can start making different changes that can affect the outcome or like even the flare of different autoimmune symptoms that you might be feeling.
In a similar vein, just because kind of how I mentioned this approach to habits that includes our inner habits, right? How we're thinking and feeling. A word for that is our mindset. Our mindset is really a collection of our thoughts. And so, in similar to what we're saying, that just because I am suggesting we can use our mind as a part of the solution, I'm in no way suggesting that this is all in our mind, if that makes sense. It can be a part of the solution without saying that this is just something that we have created, because so many people with a diagnosis on their way to getting a diagnosis may have heard that from healthcare professionals, that, oh, we don't see anything, your labs look normal. And so in no way is this in our mind, but we can use our mind in wildly powerful ways.
When somebody does get that autoimmune diagnosis, you had mentioned controlling the controllables. What are some of those things that like you focus on with your clients when you think about just generally some of the controllables that we have that can help minimize those symptoms and flares?
Yeah, over the past 15 years, I was diagnosed with MS 14 years ago. So this is a labor of love. I had to live it, to learn it, to teach it. But I have a framework that is called the Habit Hub. And the Habit Hub has 6 spokes, and it encompasses the controllables. The good news is they're nothing new, they're nothing you haven't heard. What's different is a framework pulling them together that allows us to see how they fit together and how it's not just one more thing we should be doing for our health, but instead, these are the proven things that really do help our brains and our bodies thrive. And so it's a hub for a reason, because if we hyper focus on one area and neglect the others, it's going to be a really bumpy ride and life is going to feel tough. And I had years of that. I would so hyper focus on food, but neglect mindset. And you cannot outnourish a cruddy mindset. In the same way, I would be so over focused on movement, but then, sacrificing rest and sleep. And again, that felt lopsided. And so these 6 areas that we can run through, again, it's not anything new, but instead, hopefully, a new way to think about it, that they lift each other up. And they're not 6 things that you need to do. There are 6 areas that you get to explore in the name of feeling better and helping your body function better. So, number 1 is mindset. It is the one that is the reason I became a coach. I mean, like I said, I had a pretty good way of feeling like I mastered the outer habits, but it was being driven by this narrative of, you need to do this, keep going. And, but you're always going to be a little bit sicker and you have a debilitating disease and, just this mindset that was not serving me. And so it's my favorite spoke. I say that about a couple of them, but it's my favorite area. And it's one that actually influences all the other areas, but it deserves its own time in the sun, because learning how to actually shift a mindset instead of just hoping or wishing that you were an optimistic person, that is the most frustrating thing that can happen when people are like, well, okay, but I don't think that way. It's like, of course you don't, but we can habitually, have this thinking that ends up feeling a whole lot better. So that's number 1 is mindset. Number 2 is food, which thank goodness we have you and the people that can help us nail what feels good for us with food. There is no perfect protocol. There is just the one that you choose and experiment with and get curious. And again, build that trust with yourself that maybe you do know what would be the next best thing to try, and actually giving it the time to work its magic by being able to stick with it long enough. Number 3 is movement. These bodies were made to move. So whether you have a diagnosis that impacts movement, maybe you can't move in the same way or with the same intensity, but recognizing that we need movement in different forms and different ways. And so that deserves a spoke of the Habit Hub. Number 4 is rest and relaxation. So again, we all know that life is better after a good night's sleep. And so it's less about, focusing on, how do I stress less? How do I rest more? How do I have more habitual times and spots in my day and my life that I truly allow this nervous system to rest and to feel safe? Number 5 truly is my favorite spoke. It's connection, it's relationships, it's how we connect not only with others, but ourselves and our diagnosis or our health. And then the last one is something that I call good stress. Some people know it as hormesis, or a better way to say that is challenges we take on because we know we're going to get a little bit stronger on the other side. So I've never met a habit that doesn't fit into one of those 6 spokes. And so it, again, just helps us kind of cut through the overwhelm because we start in one place and we start to develop the skill of how to change habits. And then that skill carries over for every other habit that we go after.
I love these, and they are so all interconnected. Like the way you think about food and movement are going to influence that. The way that you think about like whether you deserve rest and relaxation, that's a big one for a lot of the women I work with. And then the connection piece, like as humans, we are made to connect. And if you're dealing with an autoimmune disease, if you're having a flare, you can feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have the capacity to connect on the same level, or I feel just so overwhelmed with the amount of things that I have on my plate right now. And sometimes I see a lot of my clients are cutting that connection piece out. I'm like, oh no, we got to do something that brings you joy and like connects you with people. Please do not cut that piece from your wheel of things that we're like delegating or figuring out where it fits in.
Or even worse, they're going through the motions of, okay, I went and I saw that, I texted, I called that person, but they're not feeling connected during it. They're feeling strained. They're feeling anything but connection. And true connection is when we are really feeling connected. And so that may look like very different things for different people. Same thing with rest, a massage or a bath, that may be stressful for some people. It's really tapping into the emotions because our body is listening to our emotions. If thoughts are the language of our brain, then emotions are the language of our body. So our cells are bathed in the neurochemical goodness that happens when we feel connected. And so we can imagine how good that is for us versus if we're feeling stressed or resentful or angry. And so again, tapping into how we're feeling through all of these is such a powerful strategy to get good at, because depending how we're feeling, what we're doing feels a whole lot easier.
Absolutely. And I want you guys to be clear. What Amy is saying here, too, is true connection, not picking up your phone and scrolling on social media and sending memes to your friend. Yes, it's fun, but that's not actually true connection. We're tricking our brain into thinking that we're being connected, and we're not.
The favorite analogy I ever heard was from somebody who does the neuroscience behind social media and, the way it's created to have us craving more. It's kind of like nutrition, right? So a super false pleasure of a chip that was designed in a lab to have a flood of dopamine to keep you wanting to come back for more. It really desensitizes us to the simple pleasures of like a true delicious berry or, real food. And that can be in the same way where the social media, it feels so good when it's going down or when it's flashing across our screen. But when we're done, we look back on it and we're like, why do I not feel fulfilled? Why do I still feel lonely or feel stressed oftentimes? So that's a great call out, that really paying attention to how you feel is a great marker to see, is it really something that is benefiting us or not?
Yeah. And I will say, like, the shift with COVID, when COVID happened, we all had to shift the way that we were connecting. But we are now post COVID, where we need to get back to the way we connected with people before. We were only limited to basically our screens for connection. So, really finding the way to ground yourself and be in the presence of people that you enjoy being around. Don't try to connect with somebody that's not bringing you joy. That's going to cause more
Yes, yes.
stress.
Sometimes the move is, okay, if it's somebody that, is worth working through and getting a better relationship with and controlling how you feel around, family members and things. But sometimes it's as simple as, do I need or want this person in my life? And, the answer is not always yes. We don't have to do things just because that's the way we've always done them.
Exactly. And I do want to go back to this food piece of the puzzle because an interesting thing that I recently did, I'm in school right now and I had to write a paper, a comparative analysis on a couple different diets for a autoimmune disease. So I picked Hashimoto's and I picked the paleo diet and the autoimmune protocol diet. And so I found 4 studies total, 2 of each, and looked at like how are these affecting people's outcomes when it comes to their thyroid function, their antibodies, all that. And it was inconclusive. There was no one diet that was the perfect one, that there was both of them. They had some pluses, some minuses, but neither of them, I know it, my comparative analysis was very small of only 4 studies, but still, there's not going to be a perfect thing for every body. So you need to understand how your body is responding, and these other factors played a big role. There was one study that did have some health coaching in there, and they did like some other aspects of it, which then provided different outcomes. So we have to think about the person as a whole and your individual response. So there's not going to be the perfect thing for you to just print off the internet and be like, this is what I live by and breathe by every single day. What is your body actually telling you about that food choice that you are making?
Oh, almost everybody, when we start working together, they have some protocol of the couple that you mentioned, or there's 3 or 4 other ones that are very well known. And it's not that there's something wrong with these. They have good ideas, but they do not take you into account. And so, again, full circle to trust. Are we trusting this one-way information that worked for one person that then expanded out? And you'll see testimonials and people saying that this cured this or that. Are we trusting that, or are we trusting ourselves to take that information and put it to play in our real life? And so again, a lot of those are so tough for people to implement. And so it's an on again, off again. Then you layer in beating yourself up that you just can't stick with it. And why couldn't I do it? And it ends up just being this stress inducer instead of this beautiful entryway into, wow, let's see what my body, let's see how my energy does. Let's see what my symptoms do. Let's see what I enjoy. I teach and I coach people to create their feel good food protocol, and it has feel good in the name and it's their protocol. So no 2 protocols are ever going to be the same. And it doesn't just include what you eat and what you don't eat. It includes who you eat with, how you eat, how often you eat, how fast you eat, where do you find joy when you eat? And so there's so much more nuance to it. And at the end of the day, does it feel good? And I think some people get tempted because they're like, well, if I just follow what feels good, then I'm going to eat dessert all the time and I'm going to eat whatever I want. And I promise you, you won't, because you feel like crap. It may feel good in that moment, but if you look back and you're like, God, I wish I hadn't done it, then it's probably not a treat. And so again, developing your feel good food protocol is a skill that is worth doing. And it's a living document. It's a living, breathing thing based on what happens. Like me today, I have a different feel good food protocol than I did a year ago. And I'm willing to bet that, as I enter my mid 40s, it's going to be different. And so we are different, not only from each other, but from ourselves at different points in our life.
Yes, 100%. I love that. I love this feel good protocol that you walk people through. And this kind of brings me, because we're talking a little bit about some myths when it comes to autoimmunity. So, what are some myths or lies that we've been told when it comes to autoimmunity and the women that you work with?
I think one of the biggest ones is that fatigue is normal. It's common, but it doesn't need to be normal. I think that a lot of people feel defeated and really question whether or not it's even possible to feel better. And that kind of leads into the bigger picture version of that, is that now that we have a diagnosis, our life is a little bit more unhealthy with this disease, versus this disease could be a reason that I become healthier. And that's my personal story, is the fact that I had to create a new term. I call it autoimmune health, because definition of health is absence of symptoms or disease. Well, I can never be healthy then if I accept that definition. And so I was like, wait, what would I call it? And I'm like, well, maybe I take some of the power back from the word autoimmune and I use it as a reason to become healthier. Are there symptoms and are there things in my body from this disease that don't feel as great or don't function as they used to? Yes, but my mental health is better. My emotional health is better. My gut health, my metabolic health, these different ways that I never would have put my attention and focus on this. And as we age, because everybody's aging, I like to think that I'm just ahead of the curve, right? So getting diagnosed early and starting to look at this, everybody is aging, and people, clients of mine, they will often feel like the odd one out at first, like I'm looking at this and I'm focusing on this and I have a coach and nobody else has to have a coach kind of thing. And then they realize pretty quickly that people in their life come to them because maybe a diagnosis cropped up, or they're having a symptom with aging and something happens and they're like, wow, well, you seem to have this figured out. And so it's just kind of nice to embrace that maybe it's not a bad thing to go first and take a look at the things that we all know will help us feel better if we could just figure out a way to, incorporate them and make them habits and make them our new lifestyle.
Yeah, I think sometimes we can look at that like we did something wrong and now we have to like have all these extra concessions for us. And I mean, I've worked with clients too who like feel bad that they are like gluten intolerant if they have like celiacs or something like that. And like, oh, now I got to like tell everybody that I can't eat XYZ at the potluck or the family holiday or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, we need to reframe this. And like, you are deserving of having some of these concessions made for you, and the people that you are surrounding yourself with should love you and understand you and want to be supportive of you regardless of like what concessions need to be made for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am on the eve of getting to go to a beach with a house full of friends, and it's multi-generational. I think this year the youngest is 3 and the oldest is 95.
Oh wow, amazing.
Yeah, we come back each year, and each year it feels like there is somebody new that is super excited because I'm going to be there. One of my friends, he got diagnosed, or not excited that he got diagnosed. It was actually an early diagnosis. And so he's trying to prevent it because he had some antibodies. And he said, Amy, I'm a rabbit too. Meaning, he sees me eating vegetables on the beach, which is not all that common, and, making things delicious. But slowly you will start to see that people will notice that you feel better. And, if you are taking this on, back to that victim versus empowerment, finding all the reasons that this could be a good thing, celebrating those and leaning into those, you will find that it's really sexy and attractive to other people when they have this twinge of, I want to try something different too, because maybe I'm not feeling that good. And this may be a safe place to come and do it. So be that light for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, can speak a lot to also change can feel really hard. And people can feel like they have to make this change. They feel this guilt. And then there's this like obsession with our wellness industry of like willpower. And with willpower comes a lot of shame and guilt as well if we are unable to follow that diet or avoid eating the pizza on the beach or the ice cream on the beach that everybody else is eating. And so then we can feel like this, oh my gosh, I fucked up, I messed up, and now I need to start over. I'm a failure. I can never do this. This is too hard. So how are we rewriting some of that narrative, and like how are you supporting your clients with that?
Well, the scientist in me, with my pharmacist, is just so grateful for the researchers who study habit change. I mean, it is out there, years and years, years of data where it's reproducible. That's what being science-backed means, is that these different strategies actually work. And so what I step into and hopefully can provide is taking things from the page and making them super applicable and easy to use in real life. And so when we use these strategies, and the one that I wanted to call out, it's a researcher, his name's BJ Fogg, and he wrote Tiny Habits, if you've heard of it. But he said there's 2 habit absolutes, right? So 2 things that have to happen. The first one is it has to be something you want to do. So you need to desire it. And so a lot of people, there's so much floating out there of what you should be doing. And what do you want to do? Where do you want to start? You may know that your food needs an overhaul, but if you want to start with some movement, starting there is going to be the best place to start. And the word willpower is power over your will. Will is another word for desire. We don't need this massive amount of power over what we desire if we decide to go with what we desire. Because I promise you, after the first one, it's going to feel good, and then your desires will change. You will start to want these things that your body also wants. And again, that's how we build trust slowly over time. The second habit absolute, if anybody is wondering, is that the journey towards the new habit has to feel good. So if we are waiting for some future date when we can wash our hands of it and say, we're done, we reached it, then it's going to feel terrible and it's not going to last. And so this is where I really try to come in and say, we're not trying to get anywhere different than here. We are trying to feel good and make this a part of our lifestyle so that we never have to feel like there's a finish line, because there isn't. It's health. Health is an infinite game. We're playing so we can keep playing. And so that's kind of where the playbook comes in. The ABC Habit Playbook, that's the strategy piece that's backed by the science, that is supportive and simple. And whatever you are doing, you need to have a way to apply it to your life, your situation, again, and not follow static one-way advice.
Hey, Healthy Buzz listeners. Are you feeling like you're constantly struggling to hit your protein goals? Like, you should be getting more protein for energy, muscle support, and overall well-being, but you're not quite for sure how to make that happen without sacrificing flavor or other important nutrients. I get it. That's why I created the High Protein Power Plan, a delicious and easy to follow 7-day meal plan designed specifically for women who want to effortlessly reach 130 grams of protein or more every single day. Head on over to bcw.bcollectivewellness.com/high protein recipes to download your High Protein Power Plan today. I have a conversation with my clients a lot who will come to me and be like, for the next 30 days, I'm going to do XYZ. And I'm like, okay, cool. What is your motivation behind doing this new thing? Number one, that is important to understanding why you're doing this. And what happens on day 31? Because when you reach that finish line, as you talked about, when somebody's trying to do something, what is the expectation of your results that you're desiring? And then what happens on the next day? Are we taking that information of what we experience and implementing things from it going forward? Or are we going back to the habits that we eliminated or whatever? Are we totally going back to the way that we were living prior to day one of the 30-day challenge?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, they may think, okay, if I just do it for these amount of days, then that's the jump start. And then I'll go back. It'll kind of feel easier. And maybe that'll work sometimes, but be honest with yourself and say, did that work before? And again, I love that forward thinking to say what happens on day 31, because, we should be thinking of that because it's coming. Day 31 is going to be here in a blink. And so again, we need to enjoy the days leading up into the event that we think is coming.
Yeah. And you really have to get away from this like all or nothing approach that people have to a lot of their health and wellness, right? Like I hear from people all the time that like it's either I'm all in or if I step out for 1 minute, then I'm all out. And I'm like, we need to have a little bit of where we have this flexibility. And especially for myself, I obviously deal a lot with food, but like when people talk about like some of their eating habits and like, I am great Monday through Thursday, and then the weekend comes and I like lose all control. And I'm like, okay, I need your Tuesday night to not look so different than your Saturday night. I need those days to look very similar. And oftentimes I'm telling my clients, I want you to go dine out on Tuesday night. I don't want you to save dining out only for the weekend because on the weekend, all of a sudden there's no rules. So how can we implement more of having fluidity? Because your body does not understand the day of the week. We created the calendar. We created the days of the week. And so you can have a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, Saturday, and they should look very, very similar, not so wildly different.
That is so true. Just like the body doesn't know it's January 1st. Those are kind of, arbitrary things that we do. And so it's so useful, again, looking at the inner layers of the habit is what am I thinking on Tuesday night versus what am I thinking on Saturday night? And I guarantee you, if we could peel open that brain and press pause and go in slow mo, on Tuesday, you're likely thinking, this is what I do, or this feels good. And I bet you on Saturday, it's something like, I deserve this, or this is what weekends are for. And so going to the root is a strategy from the playbook of really looking at in those moments, what are we thinking? Because as hard as it may seem, those thoughts that throw us off track, like, oh, you already blew it for the day, so just we'll start again tomorrow. Those thoughts at the root of a binge, which I've been that binger before with that thought, those are shiftable. Those are changeable. Those are just habitual. And so there is no thought that we can't lovingly influence to shift it to one that just fuels us a little bit better. Pun intended, I guess.
Love that. Love that. So, how are we going to build these sustainable habits when sometimes autoimmune disease causes a fluctuation in energy? So, sometimes you can be all in, and then other times you're like, oop, I have a flare and I need to be in bed all day long. So, how are we navigating movement and nutrition? I mean, all of these spokes, the six different ones that you talked about, so that women can really feel their best when every single day can look really different.
Consistency, I think, until we really dissect it, can feel like it needs to be the same every single day. But consistency is showing up and following our plan every day in the way that I define it. And so, another strategy from the playbook is called master planning. And plans are such a juicy tool, whether it's food, whether it's exercise, whatever it is, because we're humans and we have a prefrontal cortex, which is a really cool part of our brain that other animals don't have. We can make plans. We can look ahead and see what's in our best interest. What do I want to do? What do I want to think about? And so it's just following through on those plans that can be difficult, because in the moment, the primal part of our brain, the one that is like a toddler, is like, ditch the plan. We want this sugar, or ditch the plan. We just want to rest. And so again, it's learning how to use plans in a way that works for us. And so let's say you have a goal for exercise and you plan for it with your best intentions, right? You're not expecting a flare, but flares happen, or real life happens, or kids need to be picked up from school, or somebody needs you. So it's having not only a plan A, but what's your plan B, right? What's your plan C? What's your plan D? I mean, we can go down to E, we can go to F. I like to say plan fatigue, which is like a mayday. I'm exhausted, but what am I doing to show up for myself consistently? And at the end of the day, it could even come down to a plan that is a self-talk plan, is what I call it. So we have action plans all day long. But what if we can't follow through on that action plan? How are we going to plan to talk to ourselves? Again, going back to those thoughts that can feel so habitual. If we don't have a self-talk plan, we may say, oh my God, you did it again, Amy. You didn't follow through. This is too hard. You can't have a plan with this diagnosis or this energy. But what if the self-talk plan that was written ahead of time is, girl, you got this. Today is just one day. Let's do one rep. Let's do one breath and call it good, and give ourselves the credit we deserve. And let's pick up tomorrow and do it again. So really, it's about redefining consistency and planning for it. We can predict things that could happen all day long, but when you're in the heat of real life and something throws a curveball, that's okay. That's good data for next time. Next time you go to your planning session, you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that I was going to feel so constipated and, not feel like doing that thing. But now I know I'm going to add that to the plan. If I end up too constipated, what's the plan then? So it really is about finding plans that just serve us in such good ways.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, it could look different than your friend who may have the same autoimmune condition that you do.
Totally.
You're going to have to come up with your own plan, understand what works for you. And I like how you have plan A, B, C, D, E, F. Yeah, it depends on where you're at and which plan you need to actually access.
Yeah, and it feels good to follow through on a plan, to meet a goal. And the craziest thing is your brain doesn't know that your goal was boiled down to the tiny version to get you to do it. All it knows, again, because remember, it's listening to our emotions, that's the language. All it knows is, I did this. And oh my gosh, that pride, I always say pride is my favorite emotion. That pride is one that bathes our cells in so much goodness that it's worth it. It's not saying, oh, Amy, but you didn't run a half marathon. No, it's saying you did it. You took that walk.
I love that. So I know that this could be a little bit of a radical take, but can someone actually be healthier after receiving an autoimmune diagnosis? And why is that? How is that? Can you help walk us through what women who are receiving a diagnosis needs to know about that?
Hands down, yes. Hands down. It will take redefining health, of course. So what is important to you for health? I share mine and it's evolved, but every single client I work with has their own definition. There are themes in it, but the important part when you go to redefine health is that it has to be under your influence. And so if I tie my health to certain lab numbers, which is under our influence, but we can't always control it. But if I tie it to things that I can't control day to day, then I'm setting myself up for a losing battle. And so my definition of health is the feeling of pride. I just said I love pride. It's the feeling of pride, knowing that I'm doing what I can to be there for those I love, to connect and enjoy being with those I love. So you notice that on any day, whether it's one of my best feeling days or one of my low feeling days, I still can access that there's something I can do to feel pride for showing up. On a more biochemical level, a lot of us don't put the intention behind. I shouldn't say a lot of us. Maybe people do look at their mental health. I know I wasn't. I knew that I felt anxious, or I knew kind of the downside of it. But what really shifted for me was, oh, there's emotional health and mental health, and all these changes I make to food and movement and resting and connecting, that's helping my gut health and metabolic health and things like that. So yeah, it takes redefining it, and it takes expanding to not only look at the things that are frustrating, because that's what your brain will do. It will try to keep reminding you of all the symptoms that are bothersome, and then it wants you to define how healthy you are based on that. Well, if we do that, we miss out on so much. Our hearts are beating, our lungs are breathing. I hope my kidneys are filtering this water jug that I'm drinking, and it sometimes comes out without permission. But it does take a willingness, though, to work with our bodies, develop that trust, and reroute when something tries to get in the way.
Yes, I love this so much. Like, one, I love how you've redefined health to be autoimmune health. I think that's really, really important. But then also understanding that there are things within your control, there are things that are outside of your control. But just because you get this diagnosis does not mean that, like, this means I'm going to be sick for the rest of my life. This means that you can do things that you can improve. Maybe you can even, in some aspects, like mental health, could be in a much better place than it was 10 years ago, right? When you really focus on these different areas.
Yeah, and it takes getting creative. I like to think of the image of a GPS, which we all use all the time now. I mean, I'm going to some place I've driven 700 times. I stick it in GPS. If something pops up, it doesn't say turn around and go home. It says rerouting, rerouting, rerouting. And so we put our destination in. And my destination was, okay, I want to have a really good life with a diagnosis that on paper is neurodegenerative, disabling, chronic, progressive, but it's also a lot of other things. And so I want to have a good life. So I have rerouted time and time again. I'm always rerouting. Things do pop up, but it's being willing to keep coming back. I have one client who, she and her husband are actually in my membership together, which is so fun and just makes so much sense because change does well on a household. And she had a habit goal that she wanted to feel more adventurous because she kind of felt like the adventure was slipping away. And so she had some very real roadblocks to the adventure. The things she used to easily do for adventure weren't available to them because of different circumstances with their disease. And so she just kept coming back. Well, how could I find adventure here? And, that rerouting is just so worth it.
And I think it was redefining what adventure means as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's a different type of adventure. Maybe adventure looks like going to a new restaurant tonight instead of like trying a new restaurant in Italy, right? Like, we have to think about what feels a little bit more within our reach and grasp, and redefining what that actually means to us.
Yeah, and it's so easy, like what you just said, to say, wait, but I want to be able to still go to Italy, and that's okay. I mean, admit that there is some loss, right? Like if we try to skip over the disappointment or the loss or the very real grief of things that we are having to reroute from and to, then it may feel not genuine, not authentic. And so really let space in for, don't reframe it yet and be disappointed for a little bit. But if we find that we allow for that, it doesn't typically stick around quite as long than if we ignore it and keep trying to push it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Amy, this is a really, really great conversation about really mindset when it comes to autoimmunity and what you need, how you can support your body. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know when it comes to autoimmune conditions and their mindset?
I think that the emotion that drives a lot of people to me, or that they're in when we first talk, is overwhelm. And so I guess I want to say, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's not surprising. Again, the infobesity and conflicting advice. And so I would say leaning into places and spaces and people where you don't feel overwhelmed, right? Where you're being offered thoughts and mindsets that are not overwhelming. And I created a quiz for this reason. It's 3 minutes, 7 questions, and it gives you the one area of these 6 areas that will likely give you your biggest bang for your buck to start. So if you know what, I want to do something to move towards autoimmune health, or if you don't have autoimmune disease, something towards health. I mean, this is good for all bodies. I want to do something, but there's so much I could do. This kind of lands you in one place. Trust. I love how trust keeps coming up. Trust that the results that you get based on your answers, they will help point you where you desire to do it, which we talked about is one of the first things that we need. And just trust and calm the noise and say, you know what, I am just going to start here, and I'm going to trust the other ones are waiting for me. And so, yeah, and check in. Gosh, does this feel less overwhelming? And if it does, take a deep breath and lean into that, because nobody sustains things for too long if we're feeling overwhelmed. So yeah, lean into that calm and that trust that maybe the quiz results can offer, or maybe there's something else in your life that you just need to say yes to that can offer that calm.
All right. This sounds amazing. We're going to link that quiz in the show notes so everybody can go take that, see what their area that will move the needle for them that they should really focus on first. That could be really helpful. Amy, how can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about the services you provide and more about your Habit Hub?
Sure. If you take the quiz, then I'll be in your inbox. And if you really want to connect, you just hit reply, and it's me who answers. There is nobody else on Team Amy Behimer Coaching. And so that's a genuine connection, like we talked about. Tell me something going well, something that feels hard, or something about today's conversation that you're like, what do you think? I want to know more, or I'm not quite sure. I love that. From time to time, I'm on Instagram at Amy Behimer Coaching. I have a podcast, like you mentioned, Autoimmune Health Secrets, and I coach inside my club. So that is available as well. And that is just a one-stop shop for truly becoming a autoimmune healthy person. And I say that we have people without autoimmune diagnoses, but they just don't want one. So people are welcome. And it's the coaching, it's the community, and it's the curriculum, and this really habit changing skill that we've been talking about. So love to connect.
All right. We will put all of Amy's information in the show notes for you. So make sure you give her a follow, listen to her podcast, and take that quiz. Thank you so much, Amy. This was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Buzz. I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen, supported, and ready to take the next step in your health journey. Love what you heard? Make sure you subscribe to Healthy Buzz so you never miss an honest conversation. And if you found this valuable, please take a moment to leave a review. I truly appreciate it. For exclusive weekly tips and holistic strategies, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Remember, this isn't just nutrition, it's permission to trust your body. I'll catch you on the next episode of Healthy Buzz.